Got to get to a guy who you can find across the CBS television stations as the race has heated up and California faces a lot of transformative moments. It's interesting to hear Gary opine on those and offer and report on those across the state of California. You can also find him on iHeart Radio, across the iHeart Radio network, and you find him here on Mondays. Again, he's the great Gary Dietrich. Hello, sir.
Hello, Mark. And first things first, before I acknowledge our esteemed former KGO colleagues, happy 2-year anniversary.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
No, listen, for people that don't know, seriously, I mean, Mark's, you guys know, super talent, radio and TV for years and years. But, you know, not only having, but growing a podcast is not an easy thing to do. And so, Mark, I commend you and the team, Kim and Albert, the whole rest of the gang, your other guests, regular guests, you know, and of course, your listeners, subscribers, all of them, because, you know, it's an accomplishment. And as you pointed out before I joined you, you know, in my view, and I think the view of all involved, you know, the shows continue to grow and evolve. And I think the quality, you know, the production values, all of it continues to go up. And so hats off, my friend.
Thanks so much, Matt. It's a great addition to have you. I don't mean to always return a compliment with another compliment, but it really does matter to have you on board. And yeah, we're evolving and things will continue to get better. And one of the great things about this platform is the community that's formed. And there's even there's the chat that's going on now. There's an after show chat and into videos, et cetera. And those who are really into the show and kind of know the personalities in the show and various positions and political things that we've talked about or just news-making things we've talked about, they have their own discussion group on Facebook. It's the Mark Thompson Show discussion group page. So it's kind of cool that it's birthed, this platform has all of these different ways in which we can interact as communities. So I'm really excited about that. But thanks again for
and I would also,
being part of it.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. I would also be remiss not to acknowledge the great Pat Thurston and John Rothman. I miss those guys. I know we all miss being together as a team at KGO Radio in San Francisco. They were always great to be on with. I was on their shows regularly, as well as yours and the others, Ron Owens and them all. But I'll tell you one thing. John Rothman has not lost an ounce of his passion, has he? I mean, he is loaded for beer and ready to go. I always appreciate that about John. He and Pat are great. And it's good to hear them all with you, Mark.
You ought to come by here on Wednesdays when Rothman comes into the room, because I don't have quite the patience and respect for Rothman that everybody else does. So I like to give him a hard time. I have great respect for him, but we roll around together, which is a lot of fun. He's so learned and just so well informed. So I really do get a lot from our conversations, but I still love to get into a scrap with him. It's a lot of fun. So maybe it's because he's so learned. So let me ask you, Gary, we'll get to what's happening in the state of the race. In general, let me just ask you about elections generally, and then maybe you can tell me how this one is so different. But when we're this close to the election day, and we're also this close in terms of the candidates' support, what can be done really, or in the last dash, what is the premium on what kind of thing for each campaign?
Question, Mark. And, you know, interestingly, just to set it up as you rightly have, you know, Nate Cohen does this weekly deal. I think he calls it The Tilt from New York Times. But across the board, you know, there is this growing sentiment, and it's being elucidated almost daily now. We have never seen an election this close by the polling numbers, okay, by the polling numbers. I mean, it's just really, truly remarkable. We are down now after the new polls that just came out yesterday. We are down to less than a percentage point, not just a percentage point, but less than a percentage point in most of the 7 battleground states. And even the national numbers have now tightened up. So it is truly remarkable. That's the scene setter. Okay, now, what do the campaigns and the candidates do? I mean, it's very interesting to watch what's happening in these two campaigns in the last 3 weeks. Kamala Harris has all of a sudden become, you know, all over the map media-wise. She's going to even be on Fox News, if people haven't heard yet. Announced this morning, she's going to be on with Brett Baier Wednesday night from Pennsylvania. She hasn't been on Fox News ever, literally ever. And so it's really interesting. You know, she was on with 60 Minutes, of course, last week, and then Howard Stern. But, you know, she has clearly responded to the concerns outside and inside her party about, we call it, unpaid or free media, and she's responding. I mean, she's out there a lot. We'll see how this turns out. I mean, the Fox debate it's not going to be a debate. It's going to be a conversation with Bret Baier. Trump put out there an invitation to do a Fox News debate. Her campaign declined. She's put the one out there for him to do another CNN debate. He's declined. So here we are. It's going to be free media appearances and paid media on the airwaves. That's one thing. Secondly, I'll just add in there, it's going to be so much, Mark, about get out the vote. Turning out people, starting right now, of course, 20 states already voting. The next 3 weeks are going to be a mad dash to get every single voter both sides can to the polls.
I'm looking at this. Obama blaming, here's something. Mars says Obama blaming brothers for Kamala not having as much support. Bill Clinton just said Ryder would be alive if the immigrants were vetted properly. Doesn't look good. Kamala. Yeah, Mars he goes right, learns right. I think he's not a Kamala fan, just in general. I've noticed that in his comments. But nonetheless, I think some of those moves, the one that he points to, the Obama move, where he's talking to black men about their support or lack of it and why it doesn't exist, that didn't necessarily go down easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These are the kinds of, this is exactly why I like that we're talking about. These are the tactical, strategic audiences and forums that sort of have to go well, it would seem, in the final days here. Same with Clinton. Clinton is really impressive on the stump, by the way. It's, I understand Obama's sort of like he's almost like this godlike figure in the Democratic Party, but Clinton he's still got it also.
Yeah, it is remarkable. I saw Bill Clinton at Sac State University last election cycle, and a lot of people said, has Bill still got it? Is he washed up? I'll tell you what, for an hour, he talked with no notes and wowed that live audience. He does still have it, and so does Obama. It's really interesting to me, Mark. We call these closers. You bring in your closers at the end of a campaign that you think can help you get that last percentage or two, or really energize the base that's weary after a 1.5 year long campaign. And I think there's going to be a lot written after this election. Does the Obama, does the Clinton, heck, does the Taylor Swift, on the other side, does the Elon Musk, how much difference do those personalities actually make? There's going to be a lot of postmortem about that, because to your point, one thing you don't want, and this is a little bit of a challenge right now, and I haven't heard where this is going to end up with Obama, but that really kind of lit a fuse, that comment you referenced from Obama last week, that, especially young black men need to turn out. I think more has been made of it than Obama intended. He simply said, hey, you know what? The brothers haven't been activated for Kamala yet the way they were for me. I mean, that's basically the way he put it. But a lot was made of it, especially inside the Democratic Party, who used even terms like, well, he shouldn't be shaming one demographic, right? It's not the fault of young black men that Kamala hasn't closed this deal. So they're one demographic that she's trying to reach out to. I know Obama has tried to do that and probably still will. But that was kind of a hiccup last week that the Harris campaign certainly did not need.
I kind of agree with you, though, on this, because I thought, and I watched all of this kind of go down in real time, meaning I saw the remarks and I saw a bunch of various black activists weigh in on it and scold him, essentially, to the public for what he'd done. But I kind of thought, I didn't think it was offensive. I mean, I thought he went to a group of people the way you'd go to any group of people. Literally, it could be environmentalists. Hey, you guys care so much about the environment. This guy is drill, baby, drill. He doesn't even understand what the environment is. He's not. We're already drilling. Actually, you guys need to show up on Election Day for Kamala Harris. I wouldn't be offended by that. I'd be like, okay, he's making a point. Whatever. I thought it was. This is. I hate to say this, but this is what people don't like. No one takes on libs like other libs do. It's crazy. I mean, again, it's the Democrats eating their own. They couldn't wait to eat Obama about this attempt. You could say, well, I wish he'd said it a different way. Well, I understood what he was trying to say. I mean, again, it might have not, it's all off the cuff and maybe he shouldn't have said it. But I thought to roast him the way they did, I just thought that was a little excessive.
Well, to me, it's two things. One is what they particularly singled out was the fact that he was singular in his approach to who needed to get turnout, right? If he'd have said, listen, we need the young black men, we need my Latino friends, we need, elderly people who may, remember that, we need environmentalists, we need your suburban moms. If it had been part of a more generalized call to action, but the reason why it got the kind of consternation internally that it did in the Democratic Party was that people were feeling like he was singling out young black men. That's one thing. The other thing about it is it does show you, one thing you have to be careful about, and having worked in a presidential campaign, I know this, when things are as tight as they are now, it's like anything, right? There's tension. You see it in the Super Bowl on the sidelines, right? When you're down to the last minute and you've got 3 points separating, you and the other team. You got to be careful you don't start kicking other people in the shins who are on your own team, And that's one thing I think can happen in these settings is that people can feel like, hey, you know what? We're down to like the margin of error. You can't make the slightest misstep, President Obama. You know what I'm talking about? So that's right. People have to be careful about that in a campaign.
Kim, go ahead.
Why are we criticizing former President Obama for singling out a group of voters when we have former President Trump singling out voters as well? If, the Jewish people, if it's their fault if I lose this, and it's even more egregious. It just seems like Trump gets a pass for some of these things, whereas others do not. And I don't understand it.
Yeah, well, I think, Kim, part of it is basically wrapped around what you just said. Trump says this kind of stuff all the time, right? I think what if I don't shock is too strong a word. What sort of surprised people last week was, they sort of, I think there's a standard for people like Obama and Clinton that probably is unrealistic, right? And that is that they're going to come riding in on a magic carpet and make sure to close this deal between now and Election Day. Hey, you know what? This was said, if people remember the context of this, probably most people don't even know it. It was said rather impromptu at a Pittsburgh campaign headquarters. This was not at a big rally that they were promoting and televising. And
the audio wasn't even good. The audio wasn't good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It got picked up. And I think what Obama was saying was, look, we need to activate part of our own base. Let's go. Right. That's really what it was. And it wasn't meant to be some big campaign pronouncement speaking on behalf of Vice President Harris or whatever. And so truly, I think this thing's been blown out of proportion. And, let's see if the thing just kind of fades away this week in light of everything else that people want to say in these last 3 weeks.
Peter says Obama was frustrated and he spoke out and said what needed to be said. Someone needed to come to Jesus meeting with the bros. It's silly he got spanked for doing it, says Peter. Yeah, that's kind of what Gary's saying. In the middle of this celebration of our 2-year anniversary, we get this. This is what I love about this. Just Give Me the Truth says, do you people have a sound engineer? This is ridiculous. Is there a problem with the sound? Gary is in an area that's got some reverberation, but we always handle it with him pretty well. Albert, I'm trusting you to manage the levels. Everyone, please remain seated. Now,
it always, Mark, I got to say, on that level, it always cracks me up. For those of us that have worked in the media a long time, you're just grateful to have a camera and a mic that works half the time, right? It's like, people, everybody at home, everybody take a deep breath, okay? It's like the show is great. Whatever.
Thank you. I also note that in the new platforms of that I listen to on YouTube and podcasts, etc., people come in. Some of them come in with like professional apparatus and they sound really clean. Some of them come in from their cars. Some of them come in from the hallway where they're getting. That's just the nature of the beast. Audio's fine for me, says Sarah. Okay, moving on. Now, why does Donald Trump? Why does Donald Trump go to Coachella this past weekend? Why does he show up in places where he's clearly not going to win the state? He is drenched in sort of this adulation. I get that. But it's an interesting tactic that doesn't seem necessarily to feed the bottom line from the standpoint of winning.
Yeah, well, there's two main reasons for it, Mark. One is, there's a national reason, there's a local reason. The national reason is that Trump has, of course, made a lot of this notion of comparison between, he calls it Kamala's home state. And of course, he and Gavin Newsom never miss an opportunity to knock each other, right? The governor of California. So it's a compare and contrast moment for the Trump campaign. Basically, they're there in California to say, look, is this what you want? Higher gas prices, higher housing prices, high homelessness, the highest in the nation in terms of raw numbers. Is this what you want? So is there a compare and contrast moment is part of that. But the other part of it that's very strategic is that Southern California in particular, but other parts, Central California as well as New York State, these two blue states have about a half a dozen House seats each that most observers believe could tip the balance in control of the House. And so stumping in that area is very important to energize the Republican base. He's not going to win California. Everybody knows that. He's not going to win New York. But what is he going to do? In the 10 days before the election, roughly 10 days, he's going to have a rally at Madison Square Garden. And people are going, what the heck is that about, right? Well, again, it's an attempt to compare and contrast. Do you want New York and California, or do you want something different for our nation? That's part of it. And part of it is to try to drag these House members across the finish line so he has a Republican House.
I'm glad you mentioned the House. I think that is a big part of it. The other thing I would mention as well is that when Trump speaks, he gets national media from it. So
right.
It doesn't, in a way, if you can, you stay with it on this level, it doesn't matter where he does a rally because the national media is going to make sure that it gets served to all of these swing states, et cetera. So for Kamala Harris and for Walz, et cetera, it might be more important, maybe J.D. Vance as well. But for Trump, the media shows up and that you're going to get those sound bites from wherever he is. I wanted to ask you about, and by the way, after Gary in the second hour, I have Chunk of Trump, our segment that we do regularly about Trump news, and it's related to his Coachella visit. So you must check that out. That'll be in the second hour. I wanted to ask you about Jill Stein, because you talk about, when we talk about Trump campaigning in California, we know he's not going to win in California. Jill Stein knows she's not going to win anywhere, okay? So tell me why Jill Stein exists the way she does as a candidate and her real effect on a race this close.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark, because really, once RFK dropped out, he endorsed Trump, but he's been nearly invisible since. Once he dropped out, it's really interesting that the whole third party narrative just kind of evaporated, it just vaporized. I mean, nobody talks about it except in this context that Jill Stein, in most polls, she doesn't even poll 3% most of the time now. It's like 1%, 2%. However, the key, of course, is how many voters, and I mean totally disaffected voters, disaffected from the two-party system, disaffected maybe from the Democratic Party, certainly the Republican Party. Maybe they're strong environmentalists. Maybe something else she stands for appeals to them. But it's, it is that classic protest vote, Mark. They know her people know she's not going to win in any state, but it's that protest vote. It's that true believer vote. And of course, the challenge becomes, could she pull 10 or 20 or 50,000 votes away in a swing state where that would make the difference? And that, of course, is the key. That is why, Democrats are still nervous about her being a viable candidate. She's not in all 50 states. She hasn't qualified in all 50. But in those couple of key battleground states, could she make a difference? Maybe.
It's extraordinary to me that she has this Green Party. I don't know how green the party actually is. It feels as though, maybe you can tell me, the consistency of the Green Party I've always wondered about. It might have started as sort of an environmentally related or connected movement, but it seems as though Jill Stein has another agenda. Is there... I get the protest vote from the standpoint, I think you answered the question well. Like if it comes down, what you're basically implying is, hey man, if it comes down to, fewer than 50,000 votes, which it very likely will, it has the last couple of times, she might have an effect. Tell me if indeed that's, I think, what you're saying. And then also tell me, who is she? What is the effing Green Party and why is she still around?
Yeah. All right. Well, yes, she could have an effect. I mean, there will be postmortems written about this too. basically, is it time for Jill Stein and the Green Party to go if Harris loses? I mean, that pressure will be enormous if it can be proven, quote unquote, that she took enough votes away, because clearly she draws a lot more from the progressive / Democratic Party than she would the Republican Party, okay? I mean, RFK at one point in time was drawing more from Trump than he was from Harris. So, yes, she's having an impact. And then secondly, who is she and what is the Green Party? Mark, honestly, I could not tell you. What do I mean by that? Because the reality is there have been some times. In fact, there was a member of the California legislature from the Green Party. No longer, but that person got elected. And so people were saying, wow, maybe there's some traction. People have said that for a long time about other things, like independent parties. There's a rise of an independent candidate. In fact, here's an interesting thing. There is an independent candidate in the Midwest that is challenging the Republican incumbent. It's making Mitch McConnell nervous, So every once in a while, somebody bubbles up, famously a Ross Perot, but there doesn't seem to be any lasting movement to date, Mark, for a sustained, ongoing third-party movement. Now, I'll simply end with this. There are many people like Jill Stein, like RFK, say, well, the deck is stacked against us. All the ways that you have to qualify to even run for office are stacked against us in these third-party / independent movements. But that notwithstanding, it's been hard to see traction gained. Jill Stein has not been invited to any of the debates. There's you could go on and on about this. But so far, the only impact has been, at least in the view of people like Democrats, that she's playing the role of a spoiler.
Indeed. It sure does feel that way. Gary, love the time you spend with us. Thank you so much. You can find Gary across the CBS television network of stations. And he, of course, is the analyst for iHeart Radio. And we love our time with you, pal. Thank you so much. Gary Dietrich.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Yeah. By the way, Gary, his segment is sponsored by a guy you should definitely check out if you're a Bay Area person or you're thinking of moving to the Bay Area. Bill Campbell is at Remax Gold, and he brings us Gary's segment. If you're relocating in to or from Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional. Bill is that person. Bill Campbell, Remax Gold. Call or text him even. 530-448-7474. Again, 530-448-7474. Remax Gold and Bill Campbell sponsoring Gary Dietrich. Right on. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.